Hello Leo, welcome to your year 2020 horoscope forecast for the Sun or the Ascendant. If you've yet to subscribe to my channel, I'd be honoured if you did so now. Please also click on the alert button, the bell button. This year begins with the solar return, and the solar return does put a lot of emphasis for you initially on your sector of responsibility, of sacrifice, of health, diet, fitness, work, the kind of little bit of the unsexy areas of life. And of course, because Pluto, the planet of transformation, has been in this area since 2008, and Saturn over the last couple of years, it's probably not going to be a complete surprise to you that that's been the case. Saturn, of course, can be very limiting. And especially when it goes through its retrograde, which last year was for 4.5 months. Now, there is something different with Saturn this year because he is actually going to be moving into your sector of relating for a brief period of time before then relocating in the longer term from the end of 2020, from the 17th of December to be precise, into the sign of Aquarius, which is going to bring up lots of new exciting possibilities. And of course, with Saturn, there are always challenges. But this year, there is a kind of split between the energy that he's going to be giving you. But as you start this new year, we do actually have a very influential planet in the sign of Uranus. Now, Uranus moved into the sign of Taurus last year, but it did have a brief sojourn for about 4 months the year before. So that's really been asking you to open up your thinking about your role in life, the type of jobs you can do, and it could be bringing out the freedom loving side of your nature when it comes to where you direct the most amount of your energies. Now, it just so happens that right at the start of this year, as we look at where all the planetary positions are, Jupiter, the planet of growth, which is moved into Capricorn 2, a very business-like transit, is alongside Mercury, the planet of thought, but also commerce, and the two of them are combining in a fabulous trine with Uranus. Now, Uranus is going to be stimulated by a number of eclipses this year, and so it's going to be a highly impactful energy. And its energy sometimes can be quite restless. But I think this backdrop of this particular combination gives you the potential to really be quite ingenious in 2020, show some real innovation. If you can break the side of you which does tend to stick to what you know best, and also that part of you that can be a little bit fearful about getting something new off the ground. Once you get a strand off the ground, you have a formidable commitment. And that comes from the fact that you are a fixed sign. But just starting things off can take a little bit of a push. But Uranus is really going to help you. But it's going to help you most if you're really open-minded about the type of people and ideas that you can engage with this year. But there could be some exciting developments in your career, your work, and perhaps in your own business potentially. Now, also at the start of this year, we have Mars, the planet of drive, in the sign of Scorpio. So there's probably a desire somewhere along the line that's going to emerge in 2020 to make some physical changes to where you live. This could be a home improvement scheme. For some lions, it could be the desire to move somewhere else. For others, it may be adding to the family. It just depends on your unique circumstances. But as this new year begins, we also have Venus, the planet of love and attraction, in your 7th solar house, suggesting that 2020 could be a really significant year for your love life. Now, alongside this position of Venus is going to be the midpoint between the Sun in Capricorn and also the Moon in Pisces. Now, the Moon in Pisces happens to be alongside Neptune as 2020 begins. So one of the things you must guard against throughout this year is a kind of dreamy expectation around your love life or long-term resources. Do be very, very thorough, and that Capricornian energy will help you. But there could be times when you do get a little bit caught up in how you'd like it to be rather than how it is. But the combination between the midpoint of the Sun and the Moon and Venus is very strong. So I think it's entirely possible that there can be some huge developments around your relationships, your closest relationships this year. Now the Sun is always at this time of year in the sign of Capricorn. But because we also have Saturn and Pluto here, and also the asteroid, which is Ceres, which is very much to do with nurturing, we just need to be aware of your need to nurture you. And if you have been thinking about getting a little bit fitter over the festivities and showing a bit more self-restraint around the things that you really like, Ceres can be a real asset to you. But it is true also to say that if you're someone who has been so committed to looking out for others, if you have been putting your needs a little bit secondary, not finding quite the right balance, Ceres is just asking you to make sure you look after your bodily system too. Now, as we begin this new year, the Black Moon, or Black Moon Lilith, which is to do with desires, is right alongside Chiron in your 9th house in Aries. Now, Black Moon Lilith is a kind of Venus-Uranus combination. And because it's in your 9th house, it's possible that if you are feeling really hemmed in by responsibilities and you feel that life doesn't seem to feed your deeper needs, it's all about what you have to do for others, those obligations. This combination, especially if it's leaving you feeling a bit unwell or a bit neglected or a bit lonely, is quite a motivator to make some changes, but also to take some risks around your emotional life. So let's come back now to the very start of the year and all that Capricornian energy. So if you are wanting to see through those New Year resolutions to do with getting fitter and stronger, which is often a thing for a lot of us at this time of year, on the 3rd of January, well, Mars moves into your sister fire sign as Sagittarius. And this is terrific. It's almost like a green light to say, if you have been thinking that you need to find those better alignments between what you give to others, what you do to keep things in a structured way, discipline, if you do need to instantly embrace some pleasures, then Mars sweeping into Sagittarius so early on is a fab green light. Now, it's going to be there for 6 weeks, so it can help you be more active. It can help you want to enjoy January more. This can be, especially in the Northern Hemisphere, a month when we all hunker down a little bit. But I think this year you may find yourself wanting to push yourself and be that much more active, outgoing, and just generate more of a fun factor within your existence. Now, on the 10th, we do have a lunar eclipse, which occurs in the sign of Cancer. On the 24th, we have the new moon in Aquarius, and it is linking with Uranus. So a relationship linked to your work, which you may find a bit challenging, could stimulate some kind of reaction from you or some kind of opportunity in the following 2 weeks. It's worth saying, however, that Mars is clashing with Neptune in the last sort of week of the month. So if there is money involved in the discussion or resources, or even if you're really attracted to someone in a more sexual way, Mars is about lust. Neptune's about, potentially in the 8th house, a kind of desire, but not necessarily a clear desire. So when Mars and Neptune are in this particular angle, you can see us being pulled towards something which won't necessarily be particularly good for us. So just be mindful of that. So as you make your way into February, there's still very much a relating dimension going on. The Sun and Mercury in Aquarius, the new moon linking with Uranus. It's going to see, particularly the first couple of weeks, there'll be opportunities to link with people, but don't dismiss those people who were very different to you. You're being asked to challenge that all this year, because if you can, it can open up opportunities for you. Now, by the 3rd, Mercury moves into Pisces. Mercury is in detriment in this area. It suggests that there could be a little bit of confusion, and that can be added to around your long-term financial management. by the fact that Mercury goes into a retrograde on the 17th. It's actually going to eventually move back into the sign of Aquarius in the early part of March. So generally speaking, do marshal your resources carefully this month. However, on the 8th, there's a fantastic development as Venus moves into your sister fire sign of Aries. If you are wanting to break out and really do something quite dramatic and different, this is a wonderful change. It also links with Chiron. So if there is some kind of wound around your love life, I think part of it can be solved by being more dynamic. It's not necessarily to put any insecurities or concerns you've got to one side completely, but sometimes we do have to be bolder in order to get what we want. So this is what this particular influence is asking you to do. Now, on the 9th, there is a full moon, which occurs in your sign. So this full moon is just suggesting that if there is a relationship which isn't quite working for you, the fact that you've got Venus and Mercury in the part of your scope that's to do with potentially things coming to a close, to be replaced by something that's new, will give you food for thought. So the following couple of weeks could be a tender phase for a close relationship. However, on the 16th, Mars moves out of Sagittarius and into Capricorn, and the next 6 weeks are going to give you so much vitality. You're going to be able to work so hard and in a very precise way. So a real good change, because Mars is actually exalted in Capricorn. It likes the transit. It's also going to be forging a brilliant link with Uranus and also the Sun in the second half of this month. Again, this is saying to you, Leo, if you can aim high but step outside your normal comfort zone and get the balance right between where you're prepared to be sacrificing and where you're prepared to feed your own individuality, there's really so much to go for this month. Fantastic. Now, on the 17th, Mercury goes into a retrograde in the 8th house in Pisces, where it's not at its happiest, along with Venus, which has been asking you to be more acquisitive. Mercury now is asking you to be very cautious. If there are discussions that you're having at a professional level around property, pensions, a business, a joint venture, proceed with absolute caution. We can't mitigate completely Mercury's retrograde, but we can micromanage the things we can personally influence. Do be conscious of this at this time. However, there is a really great piece of news on the 18th, because Saturn and Pluto for 11 months have been broadly side by side by about 3 degrees, and that comes to a close. It's not going to be a panacea because they're both still going to be influencing your 6th house, but I just feel that some of the murky stuff that's been going on during that period of time, it can start to lighten. It may not be absolutely immediately obvious, but it is going to get a little bit less exacting. Life will seem less punishing. If your energy, particularly, or your health, have been really under some pressure, this is a significant moment. On the 19th, the Sun makes its way into Pisces, which for us all is a time of reflection. For you, it can be reflection because the 8th house can be ends but beginnings. So here you're thinking about where you can get the greatest sense of depth. It's about depth. That depth can happen in a material way by giving you satisfaction in that context, or it can come in an emotional way. So where do you feel most connected? If there is a kind of a lacking that you're feeling, this is an opportunity to try to understand why. On the 23rd, there is a new moon. And this new moon in Pisces is actually going to be linking with Black Moon Lilith, which is reversed back from its starting position of the year. If there is something you're really desiring, and it is of a sexual nature, it could come to the fore over the following 4 weeks. And even if you're quite a conservative type of Leo, you may be surprised by some of the yearnings that you have. If you're a bit more daring, then perhaps some of these could be acted out. Now, as this month comes to a close, there is quite a square between Venus and Jupiter and Venus and Pluto. So that desire side of your nature is definitely going to be very much to the fore as this month comes to a close. But from the 24th through to the 27th, the retreating Mercury gets in contact with the advancing Sun. So this is a chance to think as clearly as you possibly can in a Mercury retrograde about the things that you share with others, maybe the business relationships, those deeper involvements. So as you make your way into March, Leo, there are opportunities to go forwards with your personal resources, especially around property, a business situation, where you share something, perhaps in a business partnership even. But there is going to need to be some care too. As much as these opportunities are there could be some challenges, and the challenges can come through the auspices of Mercury, which is a potentially tricky planet, particularly as when, like here at the start of the month, it's in retrograde. But it moves on the 4th into Aquarius. Perhaps you can use that Aquarius energy to get some good advice from a friend who may have a more objective view of where you are. Now, by the 10th, Mercury does go forwards in Aquarius. By 16th, it's back into Pisces. By 29th, it's out of shadow. You may find yourself going through some kind of fluid situation around a partnership or perhaps a financial situation where the whole piece may not necessarily be particularly static, but the more open-minded you can be, the better. Because Venus is also the planet of finance as well as love, and it moves into a very visible part of your scope on the 5th, where it's going to join with Uranus, and for a week there could be a dramatic event that lights up your life. It could be a surprise job offer. You could have some kind of windfall. It's possible that someone older or influential will pull some strings on your behalf, or in a romantic situation, you may be surprised by just who you can link with. And it could be someone at work that really takes your fancy and you have some kind of spark or attraction too. However, from the 5th through to the 10th, the Sun is forging a link with Neptune, so your physical vitality may be a bit lower, and there could be a touch of uncertainty or confusion around financial decisions. So just at that point, when this surprise can come in, you may be mesmerised but a little unsure. However, from the 9th of March, and in fact through to December, Jupiter and Pluto start to forge. Jupiter's about growth. It's in full in Capricorn. It's not at its best. But with Pluto there, it's just saying to you again, be open about how you can evolve the structures in your world. And you can considerably with this collaboration that's going to go on for the rest of this year. But on the 9th, there is a full moon. And this full moon occurs in Virgo, and it's emphasising your everyday finances. So it actually forges a very good link to the Jupiter and Pluto combination. So I think it's broadly going to be very good. Financial breakthrough is possible in the following 2 weeks, even if it's a bit of a surprise at the time. On the 10th, with Mercury going forwards, followed on the 16th by moving back into Pisces, perhaps something that's felt really kind of a bit uncertain can start to gain more clarity for you. It's a sensationally important event on the 20th, the vernal equinox, followed by the Sun travelling into your sister fire sign of Aries. Now you're one of the leaders of the Zodiac in terms of the fact that you're ruled by the Sun and you have this charisma, but it's very important for you to protect your reputation. Pride is something quite literally, with the pride of lions, something that's hugely important. You don't like to expose yourself to risk if it leaves you feeling silly, vulnerable and open to criticism. Being respected is actually far more important to Leos than being liked, although often it's the liked and loved bit that people focus on with you. But sometimes in life we do have to be much more. And essentially this switch, along with the new moon, which occurs on the 22nd, is really asking you to show much more self-confidence, to break out of anything that's lost its magic. You need to reinvigorate your world, and that may mean taking some chances. Obviously, you can calculate the odds. I'm not saying that you should be reckless, but certainly at times we have to push forwards in order to change the status quo. And your life could, if you let it, get dominated by maintaining the status quo this year. But Uranus, Jupiter and Pluto are there to help change things. And also, as I've yet to say yet, Mars is going to give you enormous assistance in the last 6 months of this year, but more of that in a while. Now, on the 22nd, Saturn makes its way into the sign of Aquarius, about your relationships. It's joined by Mars on the 31st. Now, when these two get together, they can see us achieving a great deal, but not without a great deal of perspiration. So if you are needing to talk something through that's important and tender potentially in a relationship, the first 5 days of April are a hugely important time. As I said before, Mercury comes out of shadow on the 29th, and I think it's all going to make a lot more sense for you at that point. There's also a tremendous combination between Jupiter and Saturn in the latter part of this month. Hard work and application are still going to be a major part of all our success this year, just as ever. But I think for you, again, being on the ball, being precise will really help you, as long as you can let those oodles of inspiration come in through, as I say, the guise of Uranus and also Jupiter and Pluto. So as you make your way into April, there is one amazingly important event, and that sees on the 4th Venus make its way into the sign of Gemini. Now, Gemini energy for you is sociable, it's fun, it's about mixing and mingling, it can be flirty, it can be about your long-term future, it's definitely about your social aspirations. And the wonderful news for you, Leo, is that Venus is going to be in this sign for 4 long months, right through to the 7th of August. Now, there are going to be the potentials for a gotcha in terms of the fact that Venus goes retrograde for a period of that time, which is why it's such an extended stay. But generally speaking, this can be a huge boost for you and help you to realise that there are other people you can connect with, and potentially you could also, if you're single, have some kind of connection through a friendship, through a group of people, through some kind of introduction, which has an almost magical impact straight away. Now, Jupiter and Pluto continue to combine this month, so keep thinking about the potential for change. Change is going to be coming this year, and the more you're open to it, the less resistant you're going to be to the process. There's also, from the 5th through to the 10th, a wonderful link between Mercury and Jupiter and Pluto. So the way you think can be very businesslike with Mercury back in Pisces, as long as you can concentrate and not get affected by the dreamy wateriness of the transit through that sign. And there's something good to be gained. Now, the 8th does see a full moon, and this full moon is going to be occurring in the sign of Libra. Now, Libran energy for you is very, very much to do with sociability. It's to do with feeling that you can exchange ideas. It's quick-witted, it's fun. It can be to do with siblings, can be to do with interactions with your neighbours. But this full moon is going to be forging quite a tasty right angle to Pluto and also Jupiter. So for the 10 days from the 8th, just be aware through to the 17th, 18th, that there could be some politics that start to creep in. Maybe you'll be tempted to take on too much. Try to resist that. A little bit of stress is possible at this time if you are overloading yourself with too much. Now, as you make your way into the middle of the month, Mercury moves into Aries, which is terrific because this is going to just whet your appetite to widen those horizons, and it can point towards a pickup in energy generally. The 20th, however, sees the Sun move into Taurus and join instantly with Uranus, and there's a new moon on the 23rd, which is also going to be influenced by this. So if you want to improve your lot, that open-mindedness that Uranus is asking you to have all year is going to be vitally important. Your feelings are going to be close to the surface during this period of time, but I think in quite an effusive way. You can be showing people that you can be very, very sparkly, especially in public roles, and that can draw a lot of magic in your direction. Week 3 also sees Mercury in a great link with Mars, so you can merge your thinking and your passion and the way you articulate yourself very, very well indeed. Now on the 25th, Pluto does go into a retrograde, which is going to go on until October the 4th. The retrograde in this sign for you is just taking you back to the inner side of your health. So not so much the physical sides behind it, but the more emotional components in what makes you feel well. It's not that anything's going to be making you feel unwell during the retrograde, but it's asking you to think about the more healing ways that you can prop up the undoubtedly busy schedules that you have. The 28th sees Mercury move into Taurus as well. Again, those ideas are going to be pinging around. It's going to be so inspirational if you give yourself permission to embrace it. So as you make your way into May, it's very much about that big picture to do with your goals and ambitions and being open-minded, the sparkle of your personality, the benefits that Uranus can bring to bear. But it is going to be assisted by your ability to get along with people. It's who as much as what you know. By the North Node, the point of destiny, moving into Gemini on the 5th, where it will be for the rest of the year. It's been in a very tender part of your situation, quite honestly, in the sign of Cancer. So moving here suggests that try to find some kind of unanimity with others. It's not necessarily going to be in the ways that you might have expected in the past. Someone could really move you between now and the end of the year. Perhaps they've got a different outlook on life, a different value system, but you could find it to be hugely valuable. We've also Venus being in this area. If you can give yourself some permission to play, be with people, go for it. It can be very life affirming. Now Mercury is also going to move into Gemini on the 12th, so that's creating more of a lighter vibe from this more worldly and this more responsible energy that's coming from the sign of Taurus. Now there is a full moon on the 7th, and you're basically being asked to manage the time you're spending chasing goals and ambitions against the time you need to nurture yourself. On the 13th, Mars goes into Pisces. This is quite challenging in some ways. Mars is about desire and instant gratification. The 8th house for you is about potentially intimacy. It's potentially about the material things that you might want, but it's also about where you can work very closely with someone else. Pisces energy can confuse this a little bit, the wateriness of it, but it is going to go on for you. So your desire is going to be intensified by Mars in the 8th house, whichever way you want to direct that desire towards. The 14th sees Jupiter go into a retrograde, which will last for 4 months. It's just saying to you that as you're spinning all these plates, you look after your inner self as much as your physical self. So if you can have some nice therapeutic treatments over this next 4-month period, it will feed your soul, which in turn will help to keep you intact bodily. So a good thing to have. Now, Mars is moved into Pisces, but it actually forges an awesome angle to Uranus in the second half of this month. Once more, you're being asked to be open-minded about how you can go forwards in your approach to life. But the 21st sees the Sun move into Gemini, joining up with Mercury, with Venus, with the North Node. So it can be a much more sociable last 10 days of this month. The 22nd sees the new moon, and yeah, it can be nice to get that switch of emphasis from all the goals and ambitions that have been buzzing around of late. So it's nice to just throttle back a little bit, perhaps spend some time with other people. On the 29th of May, Mercury moves into Cancer. Now, for you, this can be a bit of a tricky transit. it's possible that there are some issues around your communications which may not be completely obvious. Someone may not be quite as reliable as you would like. I'll tell you more about it as we go deeper into June. Now, as you make your way into June, there's an absolutely spectacular alliance between the Sun and Venus. But Mercury is in a more sheltered location, so there could be part of you that lacks a little bit of belief that something could develop positively as far as a romantic vibration is concerned. But it can, and it could be linked to someone that you've known before, but didn't quite know whether it could develop or not. Then again, you can find yourself in an entirely lovely social environment with someone who up until now has been an acquaintance or a friend, and suddenly the magic connects. If it does, you might want to keep it a little bit confidential because of the role of Mercury. There's also an eclipse on the 5th in your sister fire sign of Sagittarius. If you are really gripped with excitement by some kind of attraction, just be aware that this eclipse does go into, or is in, a rather testing right angle with Mars. Remember, the planet of desire, in a very lusty location in the sign of Pisces. So we've got a lot of mutability going on here, which means that things are shifting around, switching around. They're not necessarily based on solid territory. So I think it's probably best to proceed with a little bit of caution, really from the 1st to the 18th day of this month, as the Sun and Mars are clashing. So whatever you're thinking about in terms of your heart's desire or friendships, just be aware there could be some politics or some passions swirling around beneath the surface, which may come to the surface at any time. Also, from the 9th to the 17th, with Mars alongside Neptune, your decision making can really be affected by the swirling mist that is Neptune, which can distort reality like no other. So with Mars's desire, be careful what you wish for across these days. Now on the 18th, Mercury goes into a retrograde in Cancer, which I think could be quite tricky. If there is something that's worrying you, it could show itself between now and the end of the month. The Sun moves on the 21st also into Cancer, which for you is asking you to have a period of reflection, to tune back a little bit. There's been such a lot going on, either dramatic, lusty, or perhaps just sociably. I think if you just need to take a breather, give yourself permission to do this. There is an eclipse also on the 21st in Cancer, and that's asking you to stay conscious of your emotions, your fears, your anxieties. It's also linking with strict Saturn, so this could be linked to a relationship. Maybe something is about to come into the open, which you've been trying to suppress in some kind of way. Now, the 25th does see Venus end its retrograde, which is good. And I just generally think that Venus is retrograde. It's not one of the worst ones, not because there's so much good stuff that does go on in Gemini energy for you generally. By the 28th, however, Mars is moving into Aries. And I think this is such a notable change. Welcome to July, Leo. And the wonderful news is that with Mars in that part of your scope that's to do with expansion, it's going to give you a much greater rebelliousness, I feel, in the 9th house, because it's to do with judgments, but it's also to do with justice, the 9th house, as much as travel, higher education and all the rest of it. But there's a very sensitive transit of the Sun going on, and then there is an annular lunar eclipse on the 5th, which could bring into the open any issues to do with people who are not necessarily your greatest fans, but they may not have up until now been particularly assertive or showing their true colours. So there could be some hidden opposition that starts to emerge this month as the Sun goes into an opposition with first Jupiter, then with Pluto, and finally with Saturn. In fact, with on the 12th, Mercury going into forward motion, which is very, very helpful, that can help to balance out some of the anxieties you've had. But I do feel the new moon, which occurs on the 20th is not necessarily going to give you quite the boost you would normally like because of its opposition to Saturn. That can create a kind of coldness, a sense of restriction and limitation. Perhaps it's your own worries, your own secret fears that need to be addressed at this period of time. And with Mars in such a rebel-rousing zone, perhaps you're almost feeling pushed to open up a bit. Doesn't mean to say you'll automatically be ready for that. On the 22nd, however, you really start to get what you really need, and that is the renewal and the revival that comes through the sun's gorgeous rays returning to your sign for the first time in 11 months. And I think, therefore, the last 10 days are going to be better. Also, Mercury comes out of shadow in that tender area in Cancer on the 26th. And Jupiter is forging a beautiful angle with Neptune all this month, kind of suggesting that there are imaginative ways, even spiritual ways that you can approach things that can be a great help. But one area that can flourish for you this month is actually around your love life. So that although there may be some politics, it could be even linked to an existing relationship, there could be a new admirer, whether you're single or involved, and that comes through a truly gorgeous alliance between Venus and Mars. Welcome to August, Leo, a month that you often thrive in. There is a real right angle of passion in the first 10 days between Mars and Jupiter. But this could bring into focus an issue that's been simmering for the last few years for you, which is how do you balance your individuality against what you want and feel obliged to do for other people? Now, once Uranus moved into Taurus, it did weaken that dynamic, which had been repeating, and you may have felt a little bit more liberated, but it could come up again on the back of that particular influence. But on the 3rd, there is a full moon in your opposite sign, so this is definitely going to get you thinking about relationships. If your relationships are happy, I think because the full moon connects with Uranus, it could be an opportunity to freely show your affection and delight. If there's something that's not quite working, the following 2 weeks could see someone make a comment, express an opinion that you're not expecting, or perhaps you're going to finally reveal your hand if something has been unsettling you for a while. With on the 5th, Mercury moving into your sign, I do think that this is going to be something that you really do celebrate, because that long transit due to the retrograde in Cancer has not been easy. It has been a bit worrisome. You can move into the moment and into your power more with Mercury linking up with the Sun. On the 8th, however, Venus replaces Mercury and moves into that sheltered sector of Cancer. Perhaps there is some kind of reflection to do around a relationship. Someone from your past could come to mind. There could be reminiscences, even reunions. Or then again, there could be some kind of clandestine attraction. If a relationship is really suffering on the back of that full moon, and Venus moving into your 12th solar house, it could be a time when you're at a critical point in your decision-making process. But if someone's really capturing your imagination, from the 11th through to the 21st, the Sun forges one of the most energizing of all its aspects, a great link to Mars. And this can really fire you up. So whatever you're deciding to do, you can go forwards with a lot of gusto, passion and determination on the back of that. Uranus does go retrograde on the 15th, but on the 19th, the new moon in your sign captures the energy of Mars again. So I think this is where you're really going to start to get cracking. The month from the 19th can be really exciting right through pretty well to the middle of September. Your natural charisma, self-confidence and drive and desire to gain people's respect and admiration is definitely going to be enhanced hugely by that. Now, on the 20th, Mercury moves out of your sign and into Virgo. Just asks you to think more about finance. This is followed by the Sun on the 23rd. So if you have been more creative of late, you're wanting to shape that into something more tangible towards the end of this month. But in the last 2 weeks, Despite the fact that the Sun forged a glorious angle with Mars, Saturn doesn't. And that's just cautioning you to keep the focus there, not get too scattered. With Mars square Saturn, if you are trying to bite off more than you can realistically chew, it probably is going to sort of come up quite quickly and feeling a bit stressed or a bit overwhelmed or even a bit irritable. As you come into September, Leo, Saturn is continuing to be in a bit of a squabble with Mars. So although the Sun and Mercury initially are asking you to think about resources, balancing ingoes and outgoings, particularly on the back of the full moon of the 2nd, Venus moving into your sign on the 6th and Mercury into Libra brings a lighter vibe to bear. And if the pressure that's coming from Mars's squabble with Saturn is creating some conflict even within you between your desire to be a free spirit against what other people expect of you, I think the energy of Venus and Mercury can provide some real solace. It's really saying to you, have some fun. It cannot be all work and no play. Mars does go into a retrograde on the 9th, just asking you to be a little bit more careful of how far you're pushing to have your own space. But Jupiter, fortunately, on the 13th, comes to the end of its retrograde. The whole world's going to speed up from here. And if there has been sluggish stuff or concerns about the economy or the stock market, all this can improve on the back of this. Now, from the 19th through to the 26th, Mercury is squaring up with Pluto. In the last few days of this month, Mars goes into a squabble with Pluto because Mars is inching back into it and Pluto is obviously still in the sign of Capricorn. This can point towards some heavyweight conversations. Someone may be a bit dogmatic that you encounter, which can really get your goat. But on the 23rd, the Sun moves into a fine area. You can use your mind, your logic and your sense of fair play to try to find some improvement in situations. Mercury moving on the 27th is asking you to think about home, family, perhaps reorganising the schedule. You could think of working from home or creating more space somehow, or you may just need a bit more space to yourself to think some things through. The 29th sees Saturn end its retrograde. So with Jupiter ending it and Saturn ending it, I do think as we come to the end of this month, that's something for us all to really welcome. October begins with a full moon. October ends with a full moon, so we have a blue moon. And it begins on the first day in the sign of Aries, your sister fire sign. For you, this is asking you to think about communications generally. Yes, we can say how we feel. Sometimes we don't always match it to the true depth of our emotion. And because obviously the fire of this Aries full moon, I think if someone disagrees with you, the easy thing to do would be to be quite outspoken. But the chances of that outspokenness becoming much more into neat conflict are increased because for 3 weeks this month, Mars continues that clash it started at the end of last month with Pluto. Of all the big clashes, that's one of the most intense. Think about Mars again. Mars wants you to be free. It wants you to push outside of constrictions and restrictions. Pluto's saying you must reform the basics in your world, even if you're resisting it. So if there isn't some kind of cooperation going on between the balance between your needs as an individual and what you do for others and your responsibilities, it's going to create enormous tension and potentially some rows. However, on the 3rd, Venus moves out of your sign and into Virgo. And the great news is this is going to give you a cash bonus almost straight away. However, from the 8th to the 21st, the Sun in Libra then goes into 3 squares with Jupiter, with Pluto, with Saturn. So again, managing your nervous energy is going to be important. Try to get some good rest, but also plenty of gentle exercise as well. The 14th, Mercury goes into a retrograde. So if you are starting to think about family planning for Christmas, for example, then there could be quite a lot of coming and going before this story unwinds, which it will do on the 19th of November. On the 16th, however, there's a new moon, but this new moon is caught up in the politics of Pluto and Saturn. They're not quite side by side, but they're close enough to affect this particular full moon. So it's about understanding the impact that your words and thinking have on other people, because it could be quite powerful. From the 18th to the 24th, however, we have a delightful link between Venus and Pluto. It could be that your financial situation can change in a way which gives you a real sense of extra security. On the 23rd, the Sun moves into Scorpio, which we know is deep and passionate. But for you, this is just asking you to think very much about what really makes you feel content and happy. It's about security, really. It is a bit of a pause in the process of this year's events. On the 28th, Mercury retrogrades backwards from Scorpio into Libra, but is joined by Venus. So there is a chance to find a better choice of words if there has been any kind of disagreement. But by the 31st, we get the blue moon. And so this occurs in Taurus. Your feelings could be pretty close to the surface on the back of this. So if there is something that isn't good in your personal, emotional or family life, it probably is going to come out in the following 2 weeks. As you make your way into the penultimate month of the year, Leo, there's no doubt in the fact that there could be a real sense of tenderness still coming from that full moon, particularly if something's come close to the surface that has left you feeling exposed or vulnerable. Mercury going forwards on the 3rd will help to think it through clearer. Venus gives you real magic this month, however, in terms of how you come across to others. Someone could be hanging on your every word. Your charisma can really be turned up to max with this particular transit. Now, Mercury steps forwards on the 11th back into the sign of Scorpio, so there can still be things that you're mulling over, but on the 14th, great news, Mars goes forwards. It's been retrograde since the 9th of September, but I think this is going to be just absolutely fabulous for you. And the 15th, there is a new moon, but it's a beautiful new moon in Scorpio because it forges a link with Neptune. If you are looking for somewhere new to live, or you want to make some changes to your home, or there's an addition to the family, there will be suddenly a real more spiritual dimension coming in, which can really lift your spirits. On the 19th, Mercury comes out of shadow, so something can finally be put to bed, particularly on the back of that gorgeous and peaceful new moon. And then on the 22nd, a legendary moment in the year, because the Sun makes its way into your sister fire sign of Sagittarius, and Venus moves into Scorpio on the same day, but that can give you the desire to invite people around and to play mind host, beautify your residence. But I think on the 29th, with Neptune going direct, some of the confusion that's gone on around finances earlier in the year can ease. And then that brings us to the lunar eclipse, which occurs in Gemini. But this lunar eclipse still forges a kind of good link with Uranus, a semi-sextile. But I think the Sun moving into your 5th solar house is kind of an echo of the core energy which defines you as a human being. So that takes us into December. Now, as soon as the 2nd, Mercury joins up with the Sun. And on the 16th, Venus is going to join up with the Sun in Sagittarius true. It's true that Mercury is known to be in detriment in the sign of Sagittarius, but I actually feel for you, it's just much more sociable, much more outgoing. And then one of the most stunning moments of the whole year, there's a total solar eclipse in Sagittarius on the 14th, but it's angling towards Mars. So the last 2 weeks of this year and the first 5.5 months of next year are going to give you a wonderful opportunity to showcase your absolute sizzling, unique individuality. This is just gorgeous. It really is going to lift you up physically, mentally, and energetically. You're going to be marching forwards. Also on the 17th, Saturn finally leaves your sector of commitments, of obligations, of health, of work, and moves into your sector of relationships to begin. Obviously, it moved briefly into this area earlier in the year, but now it's going to be here for 2.25 years. So Saturn always brings us lessons, but it can bring us new opportunities. It could bring someone come into your world who's a really serious player and really wants to be with you. With Jupiter moving on the 20th into your 7th solar house, opportunity knocks when it comes to your interactions with others. That's a wonderful transit which will last for about a year. Now on the 21st, the Sun and Mercury move into Capricorn. The Sun always moves into Capricorn at this time of the year. So still some things you can tidy up. And ironically, there is actually a full moon occurring in a really quite emotional part of your scope on the very last day of this year. You may look back on 2020 and think, wow, what a powerful year. But you know, that Venus transit for 4 months, that Mars transit for 6 months in just 2 gorgeous locations. Saturn breaking away from Pluto, great news there. And this wonderful solar eclipse. There's just so much for you to have gained from this year. But if you'd like to know more what 2020 holds for you as an individual based on your time, date and place of birth, please see the link beneath this video. If you order your 12 months or your year 2020 forecast in 2019, I'll give you the rest of 2019 free. If you buy it in 2020, you'll get the whole 12 months from the time of order. But for now, it's been a real pleasure being with you. Good luck and goodbye.